Okay, this is day one, week zero, you can say. Uh, a 6 week carnivore reset, or more appropriately called a carnivore recalculate, a recalculation to get me back to feeling like myself. So, first of all, this is not a challenge, it's not medical advice. It is a recalibration for me to get back in touch with my body's signals. And I've had the experience of doing various kind of diets, like the carnivore, SCD, if you heard of it, specific carbohydrate diet, keto, Atkins, over the last 20 years, eh, and more than that, going in and out. Before it was actually called keto, before it was called carnivore, I was saying things like, well, just give 3 or 4 days of eating just protein and see how you feel. That was a long time ago, and people thought I was crazy then, and I might have been, in fact, but I kind of ended up that way, not on purpose. And I'll get into that later, but it basically has to do with coming out of or trying to recover from Crohn's. And over the last year or so, I've done really poorly at trying to really figure out what works for me. So I want to get back. I want to get back to feeling like I did before. And there's a few things I want to look at for myself. And I do it in a completely different way than most other people do. So I'm doing this, recording this, doing a live stream. And if anybody else has, you might be able to pick up some pointers here on that. If it hasn't worked for you in the past, maybe this approach will. And if you are just curious about what is carnivore, well, that's a good topic for, or at least I'll tell you how my version of carnivore is. And I would even call it carnivore ish for what I'm doing, this experiment of mine. So there are many types ways people do carnivore. Some people do extremely strict to where it's just eating nothing but beef and salt and water. Literally, that's it. And if you have a real bad autoimmune issue history, that might be useful for you. I don't do that. I never have done that. I didn't find I needed to do that. But what I have done is something reasonably strict, and that's what I'm going back to. Specifically, it's what's starting to be called now is the BBBE, or the beef, butter, bacon, and eggs version of carnivore. That's pretty much what I'm doing now. I will be using some um, spices, maybe a few herbs and stuff like that as well too. But beef fatty cuts especially is my main focus. I will throw in other, like, I'll definitely throw in fish, salmon especially, eggs definitely a lot, bacon some, and I'll put in a lot of butter, maybe a little bit of tallow as well too. What I have found out is that one of the keys to doing something like this is you have to work up to where your fat content is high, higher than you're ever used to doing. Um, and that covers most of the issues that people really have when they go to something like this. And if you're thinking now, why would I ever do anything like this? It sounds so strict. It just doesn't seem right. I'm totally with you there. Um, I'll get into that later. Why I do it, not just the why I do it for myself personally, but the why I'm doing it specifically with carnivore, and if this applies to you as well. So my general structure is going to be, and I have started today. I'll be eating 3 or 4 meals at first just to get it in because it's one of the issues I have is, and one of my goals is to get past the cravings for carbs, for sugars, anything sweet, and really being just driven by some kind of a craving, no matter what it is. I'd rather eat to live rather than live to eat. And for me, I have to get into it real hard, real fast. So today being the first day after roughly a year of not being very consistent with anything except for a standard American diet, um, I have had nothing but beef and eggs today. Um, one day is not enough to make a judge on anything. So I won't even go into my experience. Future ones, I'll do that. But suffice it to say, my cravings have not been bad. They usually get bad after the second day. And once I get through 3 or 4 days, everything drops off. Basically, the way I found out is if it's out of my body, other sugars, other carbs, other junk that's in my body, once it's out, I don't have the cravings near as bad. And so I'm looking for the first part of this to go in very hard, very quick. Right now, going very strict. However, I don't recommend that with other people unless you have the issue where I am and you're just trying to get over that real serious craving hump. Then that might be the right way of doing it. Otherwise, it's probably better to gradually roll into this and to avoid some other kind of problems. So that I consider that first few days as being withdrawal. And then the first 14 days, the first 2 weeks, I completely expect that to be the typical rebalancing where people have what they call something like keto or carnivore um, flu. And that's definitely possible. Very possible. I may end up going through it as well too. There's ways to get around that I've found, and it usually involves supplementing with a lot of salt and potassium and magnesium, so your electrolytes. And I'm doing that. I'm doing that heavy. For me, that's especially important in those first 2 weeks to go real heavy. And what that means is I get these little packets. There's various ones that are electrolytes, but I like the ones that have no kind of flavoring. And it's from LMNT is one. There's no spike is the one I'm using right now. And it's just potassium, magnesium, sodium. And I take two, maybe three of those packets a day, which is a lot. Usually they only say take one. I take because I have a tendency if I have heart palpitations and muscle cramps directly caused by those first couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks, when you drop not doing any kind of sugars and your insulin levels drop down to very little, then you flush out water in your body. And with that goes your electrolytes. With the electrolytes, it's very common to have heart palpitations, muscle cramps, being very tired, even brain fog, and dizzy as well too. And that's what people call like the keto flu. But really, it's just that. That's been my experience every time. It's been that. However, that does take some time to work through, and I'll take more or less. So part of this is me kind of checking in when I do these live streams, seeing what I need to adjust. And I even have some bailouts. Like if I start having bad palpitations or heart uh, um, or muscle cramps in my legs, calves, my toes, and I can't control it with electrolyte supplementations, I'll bail out. And I'll just start adding in something else and then come back into it gradually. That's why I usually say it's better to gradually go into it. For me too, except if I can get everything out of my body real quick, I completely lose the brain fog and the craving urges and that being driven to the refrigerator like you're a zombie or something as well too. So I think that really helps me a lot as long as I can control the flushing out of all my minerals. And that's going to go through, I expect, the first um, at least 2 weeks. And then after that, for the remainder of the 6 weeks, is going to be the adaptation, the fat adapting, where I'm actually transitioning the body into preferring or at least using much more efficiently my fat to do um, to get energy from. And that's essentially what I'm really looking for out of this. So you go through your day and you don't have the cravings because your body's just basically using its own fat stores, and the quality of food at that point is ideal. It's your own body. So let's talk about my goals real quick. And this is where we start getting into where my approach is quite different than most other people's. Um, I do have a goal of dropping 15 pounds. I've gained 15 over this last year of eating really this standard American diet off and on. I want to drop that. I do. I have my shoulder is almost frozen. I can't even put on a coat or a jacket without quite a bit of pain right now. And will something like a diet resolve that? Well, the way I look at it is inflammation. It's from an old injury of rotator cuff that has some slight tears in it. And every once in a while it flares up. The flare is inflammation. So let's find out. Let's find out what it does. And then the third major goal of mine is, like I've said before, is get rid of these kind of cravings that I have, so I can just go, so I can go through my day without even worrying about food. It's just not even hardly an issue at all. However, every good experiment needs a good hypothesis, and my hypothesis is those goals, they're downstream and unstable for from what really needs to be the focus. They're symptoms. And what's upstream or what's closer to the cause is what I really want to look after and what I want to pay attention to. And that's what, and really it has to do with focusing on what I'm going to be tracking. So I think really what happens is when we focus on the stuff like say losing weight or maybe shoulder or something like that, the physical things, we miss those real levers that that we can pull on that are a lot more durable, like sleep or how much stress load we have today, how the cravings themselves, or am I being satisfied or I'm still being driven by something? What's my energy levels and what are the quality of my thoughts as well too? We miss out on really being able to focus on those when we look at just those um, the upstream stuff, the physical stuff, the losing the weight, that kind of stuff. We miss out, and we start into relying on willpower when we do that too. And when things happen, so we don't, we're paying attention to the scale or the tape measure or something like that, and so it doesn't move for a few days. Well, then everything ends up being harder, and it's we get the friction, and so we start second guessing what we're doing. And we don't really build that internal guidance system that makes the changes that we need to have make those stick. So what I'm doing is I call it signal recalibration. Um, so I'm rebuilding my ability to read my body more accurately, what I remember it was. And that's how this experiment is designed. And so what I'm doing these daily check-ins on an app that I have where it's mental clarity, craving thoughts, the sleep, the waking state, like if I'm ready to get up or I have to use the snooze, uh, my energy stability, like am I crashing or am I wired and tired or am I steady all day? My digestion, am I bloated and slow or am I feeling light and clean? And my physical comfort, in this case, is particularly my shoulder, but it's, in general, it's like, am I stiff and creaky or am I my body feel easy to live in? And then so I'm focusing on those, and I think in the past, when I've had to do this and I can stick to it for a period of years, that's what I was focused on. I wasn't focused on, well, I want to lose weight. I wasn't focused on those physical things. I was thinking more of the cognitive and what kind of person am I feeling toward. So that's what I'm going to talk about in these live streams. This is kind of more about the what. The next one, I'll talk more about the why I choose carnivore and if it makes sense for you as well too. I have a little bit different ways of thinking about that. And I've been writing about this on a Substack under healthundercontrol.com. You're welcome to read some of that. And I have some generated audio discussions about the articles too that are just like 10 minutes long. So they're short. You don't have to read through a long article if you don't want to. Um, but the next live stream will be associated with that. And it'll probably be in a couple of days. And I'll do this at least once a week. I haven't completely committed to a schedule yet. But part of this will be to kind of see how my progress is, what calibration I need to do, what recalibration I need to do. Do I need to come off of carnivore for a little while because of some issues or not? I don't expect to, but I don't know. You never know. I mean, these are some, it's an experiment. And I think that's the right way to think about it is an experiment because then it seems always a little bit new and fresh. And it helps with motivation as well, too. More importantly, it helps with you getting back in touch with yourself. And I think that's what doing something like a carnivore diet is especially good at. It removes all the noise because you're doing something so simple. And if you're wondering, is it healthy? Well, we'll get into that next time. Thanks, everybody.